Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Subcommittee of the Heavy Woollen area. Please can I just start by asking members if you will switch off your mobile phones or please put them on silent. Thank you. Can I just remind if we have any public speakers that they have 3 minutes to speak, and I will give them a 30-second countdown, and councillors will have 5 minutes to speak. So item number 1, membership of the subcommittee. Can we just go around and introduce ourselves, please? I'm Councillor Gwen Lowe and I'll be chairing the meeting this afternoon. Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rick Firth, I'm substituting for Aman Adwa.
Thank you. Can you remember to use your microphones, please, and then we can pick up.
Councillor Nosheen Dad.
Thank you.
Councillor Musrat Pervez, Dewsbury West.
Councillor Jackie Ramsey, Dewsbury South.
Councillor Adam Gregg, Lindley Ward.
Councillor Alex Lukic, Dewsbury East Ward.
Councillor John Lawson, Cleckheaton.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock, Cleckheaton.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Firth subbing for Councillor Anwer. I also have apologies from Councillor Stevens, Councillor Lunat and Councillor Sheard. Item number 2 on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have a mover and seconder on those? On an agreement? Thank you, members. Item number 3 is declarations of interest and lobbying. Please can I remind members to fill in the forms in their packs if they've not already done so. So we'll go around the room and ask for declarations of interest and lobbying. Councillor Firth, please.
Chair, I have not been lobbied, but as you will know, I referred one of the applications to the committee, but I will listen with an open mind to all arguments for and against.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, please. Councillor Dad.
Application 2022/90175, page 9, lobbied by the objector, no advice given.
Thank you. Councillor Pervez.
Same here as well, page 9, lobbied by the objector, no advice given.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Same with me, same application, a gentleman called Andrew Hutchinson and Diane Kay, both emailed, no advice given.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, item 9, I've received email representations from objectors, but no advice given. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lukic.
Thank you, Chair. I've been lobbied by objectors on the Stocksmore application. No advice given. Can I, just so you confirm, Councillor Firth mentioned he referred it to the committee, and can I just through you confirm that there's been no contact with the applicant? No, no problem. That's fine. I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Item 9, contacted by objector, no advice given.
Thank you. Councillor Pinnock.
And similarly contacted by objectors noted.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Yes, I was also emailed on page 9, item 2022/90175 by objectors, but no action taken. Thank you. Item number 4, admission of the public.
There's no private items.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, deputations and petitions. Anything? No. Thank you. Item number 6, public question time. No questions. Thank you. Item 7 and item 8, they were 2 site visits that we took on this morning. Thank you to members who attended those site visits and particularly to those who made their own way there as well. Thank you, I appreciate that. So we can now move on to the actual planning applications. So item number 9, first planning application, 2022/90175, and this is erection of 4th stable / tack room and equestrian use of land north of Stocksmore Road, Stocksmore, Huddersfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Alice Downham, the case officer for this application. The application is for the erection of 4 stables / tack room and equestrian use of land at land north of Stocksmore Road in Stocksmore. Members will remember this application from the subcommittee meeting on the 27th of October 2022. On screen are the plans previously brought to committee. At that meeting, it was deferred for highway safety investigations and for officers to provide clarity on and outline the risks of suggested conditions in relation to the use of materials, the process when the site becomes redundant, and the use of the area in blue on the location plan for the grazing of horses and personal use of the permission. Since the previous committee, officers have entered discussions with the applicant and amended plans have been submitted. These are on screen. The proposed stable block has been moved to the rear of the site, with hard standing for waste moved to the northern corner. The gate is shown opening 180 degrees. The proposed native screen planting has been removed. These amendments have provided additional space within the site for parking and turning. The construction material has been amended to timber only, as requested by members. Additional plans have also been received, demonstrating swept paths, as shown on screen. These show that a large car can park and turn within the site and is able to exit in a forward gear. However, vehicles with a trailer would have to reverse into or out of the site. Highways Development Management were consulted on the amended plans and swept paths and considered them acceptable. In terms of the recommended condition restricting the stables to private use, not for commercial purposes, this would run with the land and would not be a personal permission. The government's planning practice guidance states that it is rarely appropriate to use conditions to limit the benefits of the planning permission to a particular person or group of people. In terms of a condition ensuring the land outlined in blue on the location plan would be available for the use for the grazing of horses, the suggested condition would not meet the 6 tests in terms of being relevant to the development to be permitted, as it would relate to land outside the red line boundary. Conditions relating to land outside the red line boundary are not valid unless they are gramping conditions or form part of a Section 106 agreement. In terms of a condition requiring the stables to be removed within 6 months if the structure ceases to be used for equestrian purposes for a continuous period in excess of 6 months, the proposed development is considered not to be an inappropriate development within the Greenbelt and is acceptable in terms of all other material considerations, for reasons outlined fully in the committee report. Furthermore, if the building were vacant for a short period of time, this would not necessarily indicate cessation of the equestrian use. Moreover, planning permission would be required if it were to be used for any other use. Therefore, it is the view of officers that the condition is both unnecessary and unreasonable and would not meet the 6 tests in this instance. In conclusion, the development is recommended for approval, and the report before members details the officer's full assessment of the development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have 3 speakers on this item. Can I just remind speakers that you can't come back in once you've said your bit? I'm sorry about that, but you can't come back in. So our first speaker is Councillor Bill Armour. Bill, as a councillor, you've got 5 minutes to speak. From that microphone there. Remember to press the button at the bottom. You can, sir. We'll give you a 30-second warning, Bill. Okay. Your time starts now. Thank you.
Right. I note that several of my previous objections have been addressed by a number of iterations of the submitted plans. In particular, I'm pleased that the proposed building materials have been amended to remove mention of breeze blocks, and the intended structure is now of wood with felt roofing. To that extent, I accept that the proposals are less obtrusive than was the earlier case. This does not mean that I have no remaining objections. I have reservations, grave reservations, regarding the sincerity of this application. I sincerely and honestly believe that the nominal applicant, who has no history of being interested in equestrianism, has a financial interest in the land being withdrawn from the Greenbelt and ultimately redesignated as brownfield, and that the present application is part of an attempt to achieve this end. Should this application prove to be lacking in sincerity, I think that the project would become, per se, non-sustainable, given that it largely relies on policies relating to outdoor sport and recreation for its validity. The proposal for a large turning area surfaced with limestone chippings is, I believe, an unacceptable intrusion into the greenbelt, exacerbated by the requirement to provide a 5-metre long area of hard surfacing within the proposed entrance. I note the officer comment regarding the use of grasscrete as being less urban than tarmac, but it is nonetheless still urban. By definition, the officer accepts it's urban. The combination of the 5-metre apron and the stone chipping turning area would be very detrimental to the greenbelt here. I think it would introduce a semi-industrial element which would become permanent. Alongside this, I am very concerned that the nature of Stocksmoor Road is such that the proposed development would introduce unacceptable extra hazards to users of the highway. Committee is told that vehicles with trailers will be required to manoeuvre in Stocksmoor Road before reversing into the site. Parish Councillor Barraclough, former Kirklees councillor, who is a retired farmer and knows of what he speaks, is convinced that trailers will be required for delivery of feedstuffs and removal of dung, and that in fact these would most often be coupled to agricultural tractors. Such tractors are not the nimblest of vehicles. I take no comfort from the highway's talk of on-site space for a large car to turn. I've never seen a horse carried in a car, large or otherwise, although large horse boxes are a common sight in this area. These tend to be slow-moving vehicles, which can be difficult and cumbersome to reverse, and will be just as hazardous as a tractor and trailer. Requiring either vehicles with trailers or horse boxes to manoeuvre in a narrow road which is subject to a 60 mph speed limit is not a safe option. I am concerned that the red line area has now been extended to include the grass verge alongside Stocksmoor Road, which is, to the best of my knowledge, highways land. This land is not under the control of the applicant, and thus the applicant cannot guarantee that the swept path condition is met. That being the case, the highway's requirement of a specified swept path cannot be satisfied, and the application should be refused on highways grounds. I also know that there is no grazing land within the red outlined area. There's no horse grazing land. And this does nothing to further the welfare of horses, which is a requirement of the planning regulations somewhere, one of the supplements. So it is that I respectfully
30 seconds, Bill.
It is that I respectfully request this application is not accepted, but instead is refused on grounds of road safety and of being an well, it's an unwarranted encroachment on the greenbelt. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Armour. Next speaker, I have Elizabeth Turner, please. Thank you. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To clarify, the owners are Ram Mill Property Developments based in Oldham. Plans show the public footpath in the red-blue boundary. This is not correct. Applicant Mr Wynne is not a tenant as stated on the planning application point 25. The last tenant farmer was given notice by owners Ram Development since when land has become fallow. 19.21 of local plan, in all cases, the local authority will ensure latest guidelines for the welfare of horses, re-amount of associated land be assured. The officers state conditions cannot be imposed on the land outlined in blue, either controlling its availability for horses or its association with the sables, so no grazing actually is available. I also understand that the land is listed as agricultural and therefore keeping of horses as defined by the 1990 Act is not legal on said land. MPPF 19.14 states the facility is unobtrusively located and designed as not to introduce a prominent urban element into the countryside location, including impact of any new or improved access. Planners acknowledge limestone chippings would have some impact. The site, being 433 square metres, will introduce a prominent urban element and will not be unobtrusive in look or location. Planners point 10.3 admit the stable block is not of a design used or seen in the local area. This application, the current hard landscaping and out-of-character building, the new swept path introducing more hard landscaping, the waste area and stable block moved, previous waste storage, now parking, leaves no green area visible. The hedging set to mitigate the intrusive look has been removed. A swept path introduced allowing a car to exit enter in forward gear, again by both planners and highways admission. This cannot be achieved by a car with trailer. So larger vehicles, tractors and trailers needed to service site with feed, bedding, removal of waste, etc. will need to reverse in or out of the site. Councillors Barraclough and Cooper point this out and say that highways have a duty to at least make sure that any exit onto a main road be in forward gear. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I have Maria Ferguson, who's joining us on Teams.
Hello there, Chairman.
Hi, Maria. Can you hear us okay?
I can, yes.
Thank you. Maria, you've got 3 minutes. I will give you a 30-second warning at the end, okay?
All right, there's a bit of echo.
Right, can we do anything about... Right, I'll be turning my microphone off when he speaks, so that should help. Okay.
Right, okay, thank you.
All right, you've got 3 minutes starting now. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Chairman. Before I start, I want the committee to know that the applicant, according to my clients who conducted a land registry search, not only does not own the site, but he doesn't own the land in blue either. And the blue line, as we know, legally denotes the ownership of the applicant. This raises some issues. For example, those giving advice on the application, not least the planning and highway officers, have done so on the mistaken understanding that the applicant has some form of control and use of the adjacent land connected to the proposal. That aside, a significant concern of my client here is lack of consistency. Members may recall the earlier application in this field refused by committee in 2021 due to its impact on the openness of the green belt. And while some amendments have been made to address the reasons for refusal, in doing so, earlier requirements of the Highway Authority, including turning within the site, appear to have gone entirely by the wayside. Now there'll be a need demonstrated in the swept path analysis for vehicles with a trailer or horse boxes to either reverse into or out of the site. And we agree with other objectors and Councillor Armour that this is wholly unsafe on this narrow winding stretch of road. The impact of this development on the greenbelt is also of serious concern. The greenbelt is sacrosanct in protecting the openness of the countryside around towns. There's a presumption against inappropriate development in the greenbelt. For essential facilities for sport and recreation to be acceptable, they must, I quote from NPPF, preserve the openness of the green belt. This requirement is set out in the committee report, paragraph 10.5. But your officer acknowledges in her next breath that there would be some impact on openness, paragraph 10.14 of her report. And this means that in accordance with NPPF, the proposal is inappropriate and by definition harmful to the green belt, contrary to policy. It's not correct procedure that a decision taker should then argue this impact is reasonable. And by the way, we disagree that the extent of harm here is reasonable when this site is so obviously exposed, visible and isolated from other buildings. The point is, where there is impact on openness, permission should, in accordance with national and local policy, be refused unless there are exceptional circumstances, and there are no such circumstances here. My client, along with others, is concerned about the potential future redundancy of the stables proposed. And actually, local plan paragraph 19.21 states that the use of more permanent materials should be resisted, as this can result in a proliferation of permanent structures to the detriment of open character of the landscape, should the use of the
30
stable
seconds,
cease.
please.
As a result, your officer negotiated construction materials to be timber. With this in mind, it's entirely appropriate and consistent with the 6 tests for conditions that if permission is granted, a condition be imposed requiring stables to be removed should they no longer be required for the keeping of horses. Such conditions are used regularly across the country for temporary and other lightweight structures, an obvious example being wind turbines. Members, there are clear grounds for refusal of this application, notably harm to highway safety and pedestrian safety, and also harm to the openness of the green belt without exceptional circumstances to justify it, all contrary to your adopted local plan, and therefore I hope members do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. You came across very clear. Thank you. Thank you. No more speakers on the item. Members, comments from members. Can I just firstly ask, obviously there's some concerns about the actual ownership of the land. Can you confirm what's happening there, please? Thank you.
So we, excuse me, so we did ask the agent to confirm ownership certificate B has been signed and the appropriate notice has been served on other parties, and that relates to the land in the red. Yes.
Thank you. Will the members please? Councillor Gregg, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I was present at the last meeting where this came up and raised a couple of queries regarding highways at that meeting, and it was good to go to the site again today to visit. Obviously, we've had quite a lot of comments from objectors. I understand there's been no representations from people in support of this application here today, which is a shame because aside from the very material application concerns I've got with regards to the highways, there's been a lot of commentary on the application, which potentially could have been addressed by the applicant. However, they're not here to give us some reassurance of their motives. But with regards to the actual application, I do know the area. Used to live at Farnley Tyres, which is not too far away, and I referenced the comments from Councillor Barraclough, Parish Councillor Cooper, who relate to horses on the roadside. I actually, family member many years ago, had a horse that was killed on a road by a tractor that with one of the spikes, a bale spike, and it was very, very sadly killed, and it was a Cheltenham Gold Cup winner. So it was an expensive tragedy that happened. And I think with regards to this particular road and the limited parking that is on site with regards to a stable yard where you would typically have people moving around, mucking out stables, you do need space for wheelbarrows, you do need space for just general stable maintenance, and it looks very, very tight. And to have horse trailers reversing out onto this road where people can ultimately as well park on the road, there will be no restrictions, I understand, for people parking on that road. You could have potentially horse trailers parking on the road as well. And I think that is a recipe for potential highways problems with regards to this. That could have been probably addressed by the applicant if they were here to answer or put forward their programme of support for this, but unfortunately they're not here. So I have genuine concerns about highways on this with regards to the limited space. But the other question I have as well is why there is not enough grazing land with regards to the application. That's making me worry that there's going to be potential movement more so in horse trailers and horse boxes. But I think I'll leave it there for now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Anybody else, members? Councillor Dadd, please.
Thank you, Chair. I know we've had some clarity from officers around the ownership of the land, but I think it was the lady made a point saying that The land's actually down as agricultural land, and any building of stables would therefore not be legal. Could we just have a bit of clarity around that? Because we wouldn't get to this stage of planning if something was potentially illegal. So just a bit of clarity on that, please.
Thank you. Do I want to come back in on that, please? Thank you. Somebody answer that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, the land has previously been used for agricultural use. The wider site, I think, as you will have seen this morning, is also in agricultural use. So, in terms of the stable block, you would assess that against the policies set out in the local plan and also what's set out in your national policy. So if that doesn't set out it's illegal to have an agriculture or equestrian use, you assess it as an outdoor recreational facility as set out in the policies here. In terms of the wider field, if that's where the concern's coming from, to use the land for grazing, that still falls within the use as agricultural. So you can graze the horses there. That is set out in standard policy in terms of like legal guidance. But if they were using it for something else, so for example, if you were exercising the horses, so if like you had like jumps up and things like that, then or if for example you were feeding the horses, sort of feed from there but not grazing them on the land, then once again that could potentially be then a change of use of that wider field, and that would then need planning permission in its own right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey, please.
Thank you. Again, just a few points for clarification. So we heard Councillor Armour talk about suspecting that it was going to be a brownfield site, that it was trying to establish it as brownfield site. And I heard that you were talking around potentially a condition that would mean that the stables would come down if they were no longer in use for horses. So I just want to clarify that. We've heard obviously about the highway concerns of reversing vehicles out onto the road. It's not an area of expertise for me. If there are 4 stables for private use, what kind of frequency would we be expecting that? And I know that there is agricultural area in, you know, around where there are gates that tractors obviously do go through in that area. And is it going to be more frequent than we can see there? You've talked about the grazing land. I'm uncertain about the footpath. I couldn't see what the impact was on the footpath, and I'd just like to just understand that a little bit better. Is it a public right of way, and how are we doing with that? I'll leave it there until you've answered those.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. Officers would like to respond to those queries. Thank you.
So through you, Chair. So in terms of I believe you mentioned about the redundancy of the site condition. Oh no, excuse me. Was it to do with the? Was that right? The redundancy of the site. What would be?
Yes, it was a suspicion that actually it was being used, so it could be a brownfield as opposed to greenfield.
So in terms of if there were any future development on the site, that would itself require planning permission. Any change of use, for example. And then in terms of the redundancy of the site, we consider that wouldn't meet the 6 tests. That actually follows a recent inspector's decision that we've had, which, let's see, so that condition was removed, a similar condition was removed from an application on appeal by the planning inspectorate. So that's why we considered that it wouldn't meet the 6 tests in this case.
Sorry, just clarify that for me then. So
we had a similar application where we had imposed that condition. They then appealed to the planning inspectorate for that condition to be removed, and the planning inspectorate upheld that decision, so they decided that it should be removed, that it didn't meet the 6 tests. So that's why in this case we feel that it doesn't meet the 6 tests. We've gone along with that recent decision. And then in terms of the frequency of horse box use, is that right? So I think, as I mentioned on site, we are obviously conditioning that it would be for private use, the stables, so not a personal condition and not a personal use, but a private use, that it would not be sold or rented commercially. So as such, we feel that the use of horse boxes would likely be very limited. It would more likely be people coming in there their cars, for example, on a more regular basis. The highways can come in on their opinion if you'd like. And then in terms of the footpath, there are no changes to the footpath proposed as part of the works. It's not a public right-of-way, it's just a footpath going along the frontage. If you've got any questions that Highways can answer, I'm sure Ryan would be happy to come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Highways, yeah, do you want to come in, please? Thank you.
Through your chair, ranking Highway Development Management. As Alice has clarified, it is conditioned for private use only, so we consider that the coming and goings with the horsebacks, although they would have to reverse out or onto the site, would be minimal, as if it were a commercial establishment where people were renting. With regards to the red line boundary going over the footway, not conflicting with the swept path drawings that have been submitted, that's irrelevant because the swept paths go over the footway, which is public highway, so they can still be achieved. So it's not relevant in that instance. Thank you.
Thank you. Highway safety was an issue that I also was thinking about. Jackie Ramsey, you took my thunder there, Jack. But it is a concern of mine as well. And thank you, Councillor Gregg, for upsetting me about that horse. Thank you. Do you want to come in again, Councillor Gregg?
Yeah, I do apologise. I was not trying to upset anybody with regards to that situation, but it is a very real concern that happens on these country roads, unfortunately. One of the questions I've just got for the officers, if possible, and I appreciate it might not really be answerable, but with a lot of the stables in this area, they're not really set up as commercial livery type places. They're very small. They would have, typically they would find that one or two people who might want to rent a stable there, and it must be quite difficult to put, if there's a condition on that says that this has got to be a private stable that is used by not somebody who's not letting the facility out. What are the parameters with regards to that? Because, for example, how is that going to be policed? How is that going to be managed? Because ultimately, from my understanding, is the applicant may or may not have horses. I don't know whether they do. I understand from some of the objectors they don't, and they're not from the area. If that is the case, could we not end up with a ghost stable where nobody has any use for this? Because ultimately, unless there are people who have use for this stable, what's the purpose of it? That's my question, really. With regards to the policing of a condition on who you could let the stable out to, for example, and how that could be managed and policed.
Thank you. It could be alpacas. Who knows? Would you like to answer Councillor Gregg's concerns, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would suggest that if, for example, each of the stables was being sort of leased or rented out to each individual, you would see more vehicles coming and going to the site, for example. So as part of that, that would come through to our enforcement team to then investigate what's happening on site because of the frequency of these vehicles, for example, and the number of people attending the site on a regular basis. As a result of that, what we would then do, we would make contact with the applicant. We would ask them, can we see details, for example, of sort of what is happening on site? Do these horses belong to you, etc., etc. So that is the likely approach you would take to be able to ensure that that condition was being complied with. I think, does that sort of answer to a degree?
Yes, I appreciate it's difficult to police a lot of things where there are enforcement, so it was really just to get some clarity on how that would happen, but presumably there'd have to be a report from a complaint from a member of the public to start that process. Thank you.
That's right, as with any other enforcement complaint, to be quite honest, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Pinnett, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say we seem to be making quite heavy weather of this. when there is quite a clear officer recommendation, which in the professional judgment of planning officers it works. However, we have heard from local people that there are or could be issues. One of which is certainly the movement of horse boxes or equivalent into and out of the site. Ideally, it seems to me, you would make the turning area big enough so that something towing a horse box could enter and leave the site in a forward gear. Now, whether this means removing one of the horse boxes, for instance, I mean, I don't know what that would do to the application, whether it would render it, I can't say uneconomic, can I? Because it's not for that purpose. So perhaps you could quite easily remove one of the horse boxes to create more space.
Sorry, Councillor Pinnett, do you mean one of the stables?
Is that, did I say something else?
You said horse box.
Horse boxes, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remove one of the stables.
Remove one of the stables,
Thank
sorry,
you.
that's what
It's
that's what I meant. I had a busy day yesterday, so that's my excuse. There are, despite the recommendation that officers have given us, there are some nagging thoughts in my mind about this, which won't go away. And another one is, we give permission for this. Does it actually happen? I know, in a sense, that's none of our business, because after 3 years it would then lapse, and they'd have to start all over again. But you know, from you know, particularly when you have somebody who's not connected with the area, and again, I know that's not a planning matter, but it's one of those thoughts that you have in your mind that doesn't quite add up into a coherent whole. See, if this was an application from somebody who lived in Stocksmoor, then you can that all works. But if it's not, and they apparently do own the field in which this sits, so they could deal with the grazing. Well, sorry, I'll rephrase that. That they have some interest in that. Given that they've put in a planning application, you can put a planning application on anybody's land, provided you notify them. And sorry, I shouldn't have introduced that bit. I agree. There would need to be some way of ensuring that grazing land could be attached to this. Now, if we think that having grazing land to go with these stables is important, and that has been mentioned, then something else needs to be done in order to make that possible, given that the rest of the land is owned by somebody else. So I'm in some ways coming down on the side of refusing it, but I'm quite prepared to defer it so that some of those things can be looked into. Because there are some unsatisfactory things relating to this, which won't go away from my head.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnett. Can I just say, I've got niggles as well, and I'm not quite sure how we can sort them. So, Councillor Lawson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, niggles is a good way of describing how we're feeling, I think, at the moment. However, I am struggling to find a strong reason to refuse. Can I ask, through you, Chair, about the movements on and off that land that are permissible at the moment? So, for example, is there anything stopping a tractor, a full-grown tractor, country-style tractor, with a full trailer on that moving on and off the property as it stands at the moment? Because, or reversing even, because if there isn't, then I'm afraid the movements on and off that stable fall down as a grounds for refusal. I still think there is something to be done on the interior, though, that would make the movements of traffic better and safer, because I've heard what residents are saying. There's a brow of the hill right next to it. Traffic is going fast, and it will be on you before you know it. So it would be better arranged if we can do as my colleague says, Andrew said, that we can reduce it to 3, perhaps, if that could be a negotiation. But we're not horse trading here in the room. But oh dear, I said that, didn't I? What I mean is I'm agreeing. I'm following on in line with what Andrew's saying here, but I can't find a grounds for straight refusal. So I would like to see it in better shape. That said, it's already had 2 goes, and I think I'd probably like to hear whether one is the traffic movements on and off, and the other is, do officers feel that this can be improved in terms of interior movements on the thing, and can we have I heard the answer about the associated grassland. I'm still not clear. That's probably my own sort of lack of hard of thinking kind of condition, but it does seem important that the two sort of together seem to put enough niggles into the soup, if you know what I mean. So if we can have an answer on the on and off movements, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Can I just add as well, when we were actually on the site visit this morning and we were sat on the minibus chatting before we got off, the speed of cars going past, I was a bit surprised at how fast the cars were going there, and I don't think somebody was very pleased that we'd pulled up either. Somebody indicated. So, sorry, officers, would you like to respond to Councillor Pinnock? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of vehicle movements on and off the site at this moment in time, no, there is no restriction there. Like I said, tractors with trailers, anything, they could be on and off the site, unrestricted at this moment in time. So that's the response to that query there. In terms of changes to the sort of internal layout of the site and things, I think, as you say, reducing the size of the stables, you'd have more internal turning. So there are things that can be done. What I would say is that the negotiations that officers have undertaken in terms of the initial stable block design that's come forward, the number of stables there, they did work with the applicant and agent to relocate that within the site to provide that additional turning within the site. But obviously, if you were looking at a different stable block with a different internal layout, that will be a new application. So that's what I would suggest on that one. And then in terms of the associated grassland, I would sort of refer back to what's set out in the report in terms of conditioning that. I think I suppose as a slightly different stance to what we've been setting out in the report, if members were had such concerns that the stable block could become redundant and stay on site, if you think that in this particular case there is a strong justification, then you can let us know that. We can include that in the reason why members felt a condition was needed there. There is the risk it could go to appeal, and that condition may then be refused, and there is the risk of costs for the reasons which have already been set out. But that is something for you to consider if you think, actually, in this particular case, we think that there is reason to include that condition and it would comply with the 6 tests, and that's something that you can put forward to us, and we can include that on the reason if you think that was appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ramsey again, please.
I thought that was very interesting, that actually tractors and trailers can go on and off sites, including this site. I think that's what I was trying to refer to earlier when I noted that there were other gates. So for me then, to move this on, I think the thing that's really crucial is that we're seeing that this is for private use and not for commercial purposes, and that will have a real impact. And therefore, I am willing to move that we accept officers' recommendations.
Councillor Lukic, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've been thinking long and hard about this one, both at the previous meeting and this one. There's been some very positive changes, particularly with the materials involved in the construction. To be timber only is far more appropriate in the green belt. I also understand the general objective of trying to site this as unobtrusively as possible, with the sort of not having to put giant turning areas in for trailers and things like that. I kind of understand the reasons, and that this is a private facility that's proposed as opposed to commercial. And we've got a range of conditions recommended. We've considered other possibilities that in some cases aren't reasonable conditions or don't pass the 6 tests. And it's a very kind of balanced decision to take, particularly as it's a green belt site and it is on a rural road with concerns that residents have quite valid concerns over safety on that road and turning and so on. So it's definitely not looking to ignore any of that. But as a private facility, I think that on balance, I can't see sufficient reason not to approve this. And I don't think it would be that reasonable to defer it further either, given that we have responsibility to make decisions in a timely way. And we've considered a lot of these issues at length. So I would like to second the officer recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Lukic. So I have Councillor Ramsey moving approval and Councillor Lukic seconding that. Councillor Gregg, again.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And obviously, I do take a different view to Councillor Ramsey on this and Councillor Lukic. However, with regards to, following on from what Councillor Pinnock has said, with regards to raising the concerns, and I know that, Chair, you've raised concerns about the safety of the highways issues. If this was to fall, the approval, and the committee were minded to refuse this, could there be a refusal based on the fact that it would likely, potentially due to the shortage of space on the hardcore area, given with regards to what I've explained with regards to the movement of stable operations, possibility of more vehicles on the road, horse boxes on the road. That is a busy road. We've heard from the parish councillors, we've heard from the local councillor, we've heard from the residents. These are people that live in the area. We really do need to be listening to them, taking on board their concerns. In my opinion, I think that should be listened. They should be listened to. We haven't heard anybody from the applicant here to put forward their case. With regards to us refusing the application, are there grounds based on highways and the potential for parking on the road that would give us grounds for refusal? If so, I'd like to propose a refusal, if there was somebody who would second that, following on from the vote with Councillor Ramsey. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Can officers advise us on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think what I would suggest in terms of, at this moment in time, on-street parking, people could park on site at this moment in time. So it is a difficult one for you to be able to refuse it on that ground. In terms of the shortage of space within the site for vehicle movements, that is, I suppose, a ground that you could consider. Whether you think it is strong enough, taking into account what we said earlier on, that vehicles could be coming and going unrestricted from that sort of access point, that similar access point at this moment in time. So that's what you would need to consider. But if members did feel that there were highway safety reasons to refuse the application because of the sort of the potential vehicular movements on and off site, that's something that you can consider. For the reasons set out, as officers, we don't feel it's a strong case, but it's a case that we could put forward if that's what you so wished. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, Councillor Gregg, you want to move for refusal? Does anybody want to second Councillor Gregg? Councillor Hall, please.
I'll second it. There's no that I've heard that's positive about this application. We've got some imaginary figure somewhere lurking around. Oh, this is second time it's been at committee now. Nobody's been, either the applicant, herself, or an agent. There's questions that I'd like to ask. Have they got horses now? If so, where are they? Are they planning on this, having 4 stables? Or, for Andrew, horse houses? Is it going to be a business? Are you going to have 4 different sets of people turning up every day at the same time on a day? I don't like it. I think there's something a bit... I just don't like it. And I don't like the highways issues either. All this about tractors reversing in, reversing out. You have to be a good driver to get house box in and out, especially another place like this. There's been no mention about taking part at Wall Down, putting bigger gates on, out like that. I just don't like it at all. So I will second Councillor Gregg. So that's the first as well, me agreeing with a Conservative.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Yes? Yeah.
Legal Officer Sandra Hagan, and just to say about the applicant doesn't have to come to committee to speak. They've put their application in. There could be things they'd answer, but there is no requirement, and they have responded to the queries put by planning officers as well. Yeah.
Just find it strange if they want it so much like that.
Yeah, but just so people are aware, they don't have to. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was, I think, just about to do what Councillor Hall has done. So I do agree there. And to some extent, there is something to be said. I know I don't normally say this, but to refuse it, and if they then want to go to appeal, that will then be tested by a third party. But you can't do it the other way around. So.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Firth, did you want to come in?
Just something that Councillor Hall said, because I was late and I had a look at the site just after you'd gone. And it surprised me that there's nothing on the application, as Councillor Hall says, about widening the gate, because that would make it easier for access and egress from the site if it were a lot wider space. Puzzled, but intrigued.
Thank you, Councillor. Officer, do you want to come back in? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Apologies, Councillor Hall, you missed the site visit this time, but they are actually proposed to widen the existing gate. So it's currently circa 3 metres wide, and they're looking to widen it to 4.5 metres. Just for your information, thank you.
Officers, anyone else want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. So I think just building up a little bit more then in terms of the suggested highway reason for refusal. I think sort of taken from what members have been saying about sort of the concern about the inadequate internal space within the site to provide for safe and efficient use of vehicles entering and exiting the highway network, the local highway network. Is it sort of something along those sort of lines? So, like I said, that inadequate internal space and then the subsequent unsafe vehicle movements in and out of the site. Is that what you're thinking?
Councillor Gregg again.
It was just really adequate space for stable operations, because when you've got those taking place, you are going to be limited with regards to vehicle movements. There has to be some sort of accommodation for people operating, mucking out, wheelbarrows, movement of horses. If there's 4 horses in there, they're going to need to have, they're going to need to be groomed. They're not always going to be in the stables. So for example, if you've got operations taking place in a stable yard, there's not always going to be able to move it. Vehicles can't move in and out of that limited hardcore area. That's the concerns with regards to whether that's possible to relay on the refusal. I'm not sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Can I bring Councillor Lawson in as well, please?
Thank you, Chair. I did say I had some niggles about the application, and those have all been well aired. One of the other things that I do notice about this application, though, is that there's a lot of hypotheticals surrounding it. A lot of what ifs, a lot of who is, and a lot of what could be in the future. I think I'd just like to make the point that this does have the overarching protections of the Greenbelt status, and that anything else further that happens on this land has to come back to this this committee to be okayed. And if it's not okayed by this committee, then there will be enforcement to knock it back. So yes, I've been on balance on this all the way through, and yes, I've got niggles about it as it stands. But I think at the moment I'm tempted to vote with Councillor Ramsey's motion to bring it into a regulation, to bring our view onto it, and to make sure that it's operated properly, rather than it come back in a way that is out of our control. Because once it's refused, goes to appeal, and then gets knocked back. We're kind of on the back foot on that. Then we lose some of the control. So I'm tempted to vote with Councillor Ramsey's motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do officers want to come back in at all? Councillor Lawson's? No.
No, like I say, you've got 2 motions on the table. Yeah. You had the first one in terms of the officer recommendation and a second vote on that. So if you want to go to that, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so if I've got this right, Councillor Ramsey moved approval and Councillor Lukic seconded. So can we go around and all those in favour of approval, please?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Councillor Firth?
Against.
Councillor Hall? Against. Councillor Dadd?
Against.
Councillor Pervez?
Against.
Councillor Ramsey? For. Councillor Gregg?
Against.
Councillor Lukic?
For.
Councillor Lawson?
For.
Councillor Pinnock?
Against.
Councillor Lowe?
Against.
Okay, so that falls. So that's 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 7. Okay. So if you move to your
Right, so I had Councillor Gregg move refusal and Councillor Hall second refusal. So can we go around the room, please, for the vote on that?
Councillor Firth?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Councillor Dadd?
For.
Councillor Pervez?
For.
Councillor Ramsey?
Against.
Councillor Gregg?
For.
Councillor Lukic?
Against.
Councillor Lawson?
Against.
Councillor Pinnock?
For.
Councillor Lowe?
For refusal.
Okay, so the application is refused.
No, I've not said we're on a break. No, I said nothing about a break. I'll let you know. Sit. Thank you, members. Agenda item number 10, planning application 2022/90804, erection of dwelling, formation of access and other associate operations, Bell Cabin, Long Lane, Earls Eaton, Dewsbury. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Colin Harrison, Development Management and Case Officer for application 2022-90804 at Bell Cabin, Long Lane, Earls Eaton, for the erection of dwelling, formation of access and other associated operations. The application was previously heard at the Heavy Woollen Committee held on the 15th of December. Members deferred the item for officers to look into the history of the site and to allow the applicant to attempt to address and overcome all three reasons put forward for refusal. Following the previous committee meeting, officers sent a comprehensive list to the applicant of what was required and have worked closely with the applicant and their agent. As members will know, the application site is set within the Greenbelt. The application site has undergone unauthorised development, which is subject to an enforcement notice whereby the applicant has failed to comply. Officers therefore wish to set out where the assessment should be started. As shown on the screen, the MPPF defines previously developed and brownfield land as land which is or was occupied by a permanent structure, including the curtilage of the developed land and any associated fixed surface infrastructure. This excludes land that is or was last occupied by agricultural or forestry buildings, land that has been developed for minerals extraction, and land that was previously developed but where the remains of the permanent structure or fixed surface structures have blended into the landscape. It's important to know these exclusions as we go on into the history of the site. Officers have put together a timeline of the history of Bell Cabin. This is based upon information submitted by the applicant since the last committee. As can be seen on the timeline, which is based on the applicant's own statements, since the 1960s, the site has been used in association with the mine workings or for agriculture. Then the alleged use of Bell Cabin ceased, and over 4 decades, the land and any structures got reclaimed back to nature and officers deemed blended back into the landscape. There was also never any access from Long Lane, nor was the site ever cleared like it is now. This all occurred between 2012 and today. On screen now are the only photos submitted by the applicant. The applicant states themselves that there is no documented history of the site other than the photos on screen now. As per the definition shown 2 slides ago, any previously developed land had blended into the landscape, and as such, the history of the site is deemed irrelevant to the assessment. However, the lack of documented evidence only reaffirms the officer's position that the site is not previously developed, and there is no evidence to show that there is any open market dwelling or any development which would constitute brownfield land. Whilst officers appreciate the photos on screen, they don't alter this opinion. On screen now is aerial imagery as to show why officers deem that any previously developed land, not that there is any substantial evidence to prove this, had previously been reclaimed by nature and blended into the landscape. The works conducted between 2012 and 2018 were extensive clearing works, formation of an access onto Long Lane and siting of a caravan. These were carried out without any planning permission whatsoever and show disregard to the green belt, the surrounding area and ecology. The site, as shown in 2012, should be where members start their assessment with regard to the impact, as this was the state of the site prior to the unlawful works taking place. On screen now are just some images of the site to remind members of its current position. The top left, you can see the woodland surrounding the site, and as per the aerial imagery, this is what used to cover this site also. The timeline on screen now shows a planning history. The timeline shows local authority being consistent with their stance on reviews and development on this Greenbelt site. Despite applications being refused as far back as 2016, works have still continued to the site. Every single application for development, for the clearance of the site, or for the erection of the access from Long Lane have been refused or withdrawn. It should be noted that the Heavy Woollen Planning Subcommittee refused an application for a formation of access and erection of dwelling in 2017 also. Going on to the development as proposed now, an amended site plan was received after the committee report was published, and as such its impact has been assessed in the committee update. The site plan proposes a new access ramp and new position for the dwelling. The new access ramp will be more than double in size and mass of the originally proposed, which had been unlawfully constructed. whilst the proposed access would now be acceptable on highway safety grounds, by at least doubling its scale and massing, it has an even more harmful impact on the greenbelt. Chapter 13 of the MPPF states that engineering operations should only be permitted if they preserve the openness of the greenbelt and do not conflict within the purpose of including land within it. This huge structure, in order to provide access into a site within the greenbelt, detrimentally harms the character and openness. It would see a massive incongruous urban feature introduced into the greenbelt landscape for a domestic purpose, which is wholly not acceptable due to it harming and degrading the openness, purpose and character of the greenbelt. Notwithstanding the greenbelt issues, the site is set within the Kirklees Wildlife Habitat Network, as can be seen by the green layer on screen. The applicant has submitted a preliminary ecological assessment. However, this does not take value of the site prior to the unauthorised development, which is against the guidance in the Biodiversity Net Gain Technical Advice Note. Furthermore, there has not been an ecological design strategy submitted, and as such, there is no signs of any consideration or attempt to show that a biodiversity net gain could be provided on the site. However, notwithstanding this insufficient information, Local Plan Policy LP30 of the Kirklees Local Plan requires all developments safeguard and enhance the function and connectivity of the Kirklees Wildlife Habitat Network. The proposals would, and already have, resulted in a loss of huge area of wildlife habitat network. By virtue of siting residential development within the network, the application fails to safeguard or enhance this network. As such, the scheme will cause detrimental biodiversity and ecological impact. The loss of 1,700 metres squared of the wildlife habitat network to provide one dwelling is incomprehensible harmful. This harm is totally unacceptable and contrary to all national and local policy with regard to biodiversity. Therefore, notwithstanding the other reasons for refusal, officers strongly recommend the application be refused on ecology grounds also. Moving on to land stability, the site is located within the high-risk area based upon the historic coal mine legacy. Records indicate that within 20 metres of the application site there are 2 mine shaft entries, with one being within 5 metres of the development. In fact, it can be seen in that green box just above my cursor there. Whilst the mine shafts have been capped, the applicant has not set out or detailed the calculated zone of influence, otherwise known as the no-build exclusion zone. The applicant's own coal mining risk assessment states that there is a potential future ground instability risk to the adjacent section of the proposed access, slope and public highway. For this reason, the Coal Authority object to the proposed development and state it is highly likely that the proposed ramp is set within the no-build zone. As such, the proposed development represents a significant danger which could cause serious or fatal injury to end users of the dwelling and the adjacent highway, as well as harm to the environment via land potentially collapsing. To permit the development will be contrary to Kirklees Local Plan Policy LP53 and paragraph 183 of the MPPF with regard to land stability. To conclude, the proposed development would represent inappropriate development and is considered to be detrimentally and significantly harmful to the openness and character of the Greenbelt. As per evidence put forward by the applicant, the alleged historic activities on the site do not equate to the site being classed as brownfield or previously developed as per the definition shown. The existing unlawful works are being conducted with blatant disregard to the greenbelt and ecological value of the land. The site at present is a scar on the landscape and the area where this proposed development would further exacerbate this. The development also causes huge unjustifiable harm to ecology and presents a real danger to end users with regard to unstable land. As such, officers strongly recommend that the application be refused for the reasons set out in the updated committee report, and allow for KC enforcement to take action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I have 2 speakers. Can I ask Councillor Cathy Scott first, please? Yes, please. You can sit down as well if you like. Councillor Scott, you've got 5 minutes to speak. I'll give you a 30-second warning at the end. Thank you.
Right, so good afternoon, members. It will be no shock to you today that I'm here in support of the application for the Bell Cabin site in Earlseaton. You've already heard my comments before at this committee. I have grown up in Earlseaton and I'm very familiar with this site. I do take issues with some of the communications that's been made with you today. I have concern. I think the applicant has presented evidence to you. But moving forward, I will just discuss what we need to. You will recall when this application came before you and was deferred at committee on the 15th of December. as members wanted additional information on the previous use of the site, the highways-related sightlines and structural work adjacent to the highways. And mitigation measures to replace the loss of wildlife and habitat. Highways of the council are satisfied that the concerns related to highways can be addressed through planning condition. I'm finding it deeply concerning now that new things are being introduced. So whilst the officer's report sets out that they still have concerns about the impact on the wildlife network, I've seen evidence and also acknowledged by officers that they've commissioned a report, the applicant, Brooks Ecological Consultants, which was acknowledged and received, with it set out recommendations in it to mitigate against any impact, which can be conditional, because there were 7 points on the application where it could be attached to this. Officers have all this information. The coal mining, which is also being brought into it, when this wasn't part of why the reason it was confirmed, coal mining are concerned only because of the enforcement on the site, that if it isn't successful, that the enforcement has to take place. They have no concerns with the site or its design. They've told their applicant it is their responsibility to cap up and fill, and the applicant is more than willing to work with them and design this out with them. The officer's report, again, as I said, makes reference to the coal mining, which cannot be introduced at this time. This was not one of the reasons why it was deferred. You can go back and check it online. Your report, again, refers to 2 mines entries. There is only one. The other part where you're talking about, it's the zone of influence. And the officer has had that report and acknowledged it back in February, so they're fully aware. The applicant has submitted everything before you today, but any new introduction that you're now asking for now, contrary to why it was deferred, you should have the grace to allow the applicant yet again to go back to give you the information which you've already had twice. And the planning consultant, unfortunately, couldn't be here today, and he's more than welcome to come should this be deferred. But I would ask members that you look at this. And I reiterate again, as I said before at the last committee, this is a brownfield site within a green belt. It has no detrimental impact in the surrounding area or properties. This is not an attempt to domesticate a site contrary to the policies of LP30 and LP31. Members, I want you to be aware that this applicant bought this site in 2016. All previous developments on that site was tried before him. So what is really concerning is he's facing the impact and financial problems because of us not allowing it to continue. I know that's not a planning condition, but if you look at the biodiversity reports that he submitted, the introduction of hedge planting, everything which this council officer has got, I really believe that this could be a successful application, and we want to look at it as a windfall site, and that's what it should be.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I've got Lucy Buckley, please. Thank you, Lucy. You've got 3 minutes, and again, I'll give you a 30-second warning, okay? And ready to start? Your time starts now, Lucy. Thank you. Just press the button for your microphone. Thank you.
Sorry. Application was deferred from in the last committee due to the issues with the highways. One of the issues was the site of visibility. We provided the drawings previously. We made some minor amendments to the access at the top, removing 1.5 metre section of walling, which will achieve what the highways were requested. The highways have no issue with this planning application, they're in support of it. with regards to the mining thing that you keep mentioning, there is only one. We had a full topo survey, site investigation, ground investigation, all the calculations are there. Remedial recommendations have all been provided to both planners and the Coal Mining Authority. That drawing that you showed up there, that circle is the zone of influence that would be, we wouldn't be allowed to build on following our remediation works that have been, like I said, they've been provided to the planners on numerous occasions. You've got all the calculations and the reports. With regards to the ecology, Brooks did the survey, produced a report. They've found no significant, not of any significance other than brambles and scrub on that site. And that's based on what she found on that survey that day. She did go back to 2020, not 2012 as Callum wanted it to. And with regards to the application, I don't believe it should be refused, rather than incorporating the recommendations in the ecology report as part of the planning application. I've got nothing other to say than what I already said in the previous committee. All the information has been provided, and we've demonstrated that we can achieve everything that we were asked to provide, including the history of the site. Callum has got that. He got that in February. There are services on the site: electric, water, and waste.
30 seconds, please.
So all that information and the site history has all been provided, and you have got that for you to see. So I've got nothing else to say.
Thank you.
I do apologise, I wasn't prepared. Somebody else was supposed to come in my place.
Thank you. Members, any questions, comments? Councillor Lukic, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, we've been to this one a couple of times. I fully understand why it was referred by Councillor Firth, based on knowledge of the site and previous use of the site, thinking this could well be previously developed land, and also everything that Councillor Scott has said in relation to previous use of the land, as well as some good points, some acknowledged in the report, like, highways are no longer concerned, I understand. I think Callum's presentation was very clear and useful in relation to the history of the site, and the position in relation to the status of the land having been investigated. And so the facts, as I understand them now, are, I suppose, with everything considered that we know about how the land's been previously used, it is not classed under the NPPF as previously developed land. And even if it was, it had been reclaimed by nature anyway. And the land remains in the green belt. So the first reason for refusal is about the green belt, and there not being very special circumstances to justify the development in the green belt. So it comes back to the principle of development. And it was raised as well whether this could be classed as a windfall site, but I don't feel it appropriate to have inappropriate developments in the green belt without very special circumstances to justify them as a windfall site. So I just, mainly for the principle of development, I understand the arguments for deferring it on some of the points, that, ecology and so on. I'm struggling to see how it can get past the principle of development in the green belt. But I would like officers just to clarify the position on coal mining, please, and what the Coal Authority's current position is, because there's been some, I think, differing positions put in relation to that. So just taking into account of the representations that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luckett. Do you want to come back in, please? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Solely in relation to the coal point of view then. Yeah, on the previous application, this application on the previous time round to committee, that wasn't raised as an objection. The Coal Authority did raise concerns. They wanted additional information, but we thought we could look to condition them if it was to be approved by committee. This time around, with the new access ramp, it goes a lot closer to the mine shaft. We agree with what the applicant said then, that there is potentially only one on the site. It was 2 within 20 metres, so that could be down any direction. That's just the survey, but there's definitely one, as was shown on that slide, within the site. That is within 5 metres of the new access proposed. On the site plan where it should have been shown, there is no zone of influence. The calculations may have been made somewhere, but it hasn't been shown to us. There's every chance it may have been made in their statement before, but we haven't seen it. There's a very good chance that ramp is within the zone of no influence, with it, the no build zone, with it only being 5 metres, and as such the Coal Authority ultimately object until they receive that information. They can't guess how far it would be. It's a calculation, so they object on that ground. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question, please? Can I ask Highways, are you happy with these plans and the new access?
Through you, Chair. The information that were previously requested at the previous meeting in October was submitted just short of 2 weeks ago. We've had limited time to have a look at it, but in respect of your question, yes, it's now acceptable. So the gradient down to the site is approximately 1 in 8, where it was before it was steeper, and they've achieved those sight lines now. There's questions across what land it was taken, but it's been established that the grass verge is highway verge, so they can achieve the 2.4 by 43, just short of metres visibility display. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Councillor Pinnock, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there are 3 reasons for refusal here, but it does seem to me that the previous Highways reason for refusal does kind of impinge on the rest, because the fact that there's now a much bigger ramp, that means it's trespassing even further into the green belt, where there wasn't an access before, and it's also quite clear that even if there was something on the site before, there is a specific exclusion for buildings and other structures related to extractive uses, coal mining, in other words. That's not within the definition of previously developed land. So we are in effect, before the current occupiers moved in, admittedly, but it had already been changed from Greenbelt to a site which may not have a great deal of biodiversity going for it. I don't know. I don't know what's in this report, but it almost certainly won't be what the biodiversity would be in the woodland that exists on either side of this site. So I personally think the reasons for refusal are quite sound, because the requirements have not been met to prove otherwise. I will hesitate moving the recommendation until I've heard other people speak.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Firth, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application, or previous applications, have been hanging around for many years. And you've all had a look at the site. To develop it would be a massive improvement on the area. It was clearly mines, we know that before, There was also a dwelling on that site. So, and I've read the report as a view. It goes back to, I think, 1922, and we've seen those pictures that, that you have to accept that there was a dwelling on that site. It's clearly a brownfield site to me. I wouldn't have put it to this committee otherwise. I've written a few notes down. That it would be a massive improvement on this site, and to develop a property on it would be a really great asset for local people. As I read it in the updates, the main reason for refusal was highways, and highways have, as I've read it, and they are one of the reasons for highways. The sightlines was the reason, I believe, coming out of the site, not the gradient. And the improved drawing, which has a J on it, is actually worse than the other one, to my mind. That could be improved greatly by just a straight line down and a parking area at the bottom, and then it wouldn't touch on the circle that you've given us on the map. But the applicant can't do right for doing wrong, because he's improved that gradient and made the application worse in planners' eyes. So I've known this area really all my life. Not 120 years. I was not there when they were mining. Can I make that clear? But when does this site become a brownfield site ever? The applicant has told us all it was scrub and brambles, and it was scrub and brambles. Another thought, by the way, how did they access the site previously? You know, when it was a dwelling, when it was horses ran in it for a while, that's a fact, by the way. And a lot of the work, the rubble that's on site, was from the previous development. A lot of the stone has gone, by the way, because I presume locals had it away, because it was a stone building before, and there's not much left of that. But I can see absolutely no reason for accepting the principle of development on this site. I think there's clearly work to do, but if we accept the principle that this site can be developed, I know it's in the green belt, but it's a ribbon. If you look that over the wall, there's nothing else can be developed on that site because it's almost like jumping off a cliff, both sides. So you won't be developing a principle of development in the green belt on that line because it's impossible to build on it. So if we could accept the principle of development on this brownfield site, I'm sure officers could work with the applicant to come up perhaps with a better internal design. I move it.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Can I just bring officers in before I bring Councillor Hall in? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, just in respect to Councillor Firth's comments, no, I totally appreciate what he's saying. Is what they're proposing now is an improvement on the site as it sits, but as per policy and all guidance, that shouldn't be the start point. It shouldn't be an improvement on how it sits now. It should be an improvement before the unauthorised works take place. I'm just going to bring up those aerial images again. So the unauthorised works there took place between 2012 and 2018. The forage on the far left is 2002. So yeah, as I say, I appreciate what Councillor Firth is saying. It is an improvement on top of the unauthorised works that have taken place. And I appreciate what he's saying about there is nothing else that could be developed on there. But in our eyes, and in planning policy eyes, it is a greenbelt site that is not previously developed. Therefore, we shouldn't be encouraging any real development that's inappropriate in the greenbelt on it. And then I'd just like to point you into paragraphs 10.9 in the officer report, which does set out that if members were to deem it is brownfield, There's a various policy process to go through, whether it has a more severe impact on the green belt than what was there previously. I think without a doubt in our eyes that it is a lot more impactful than what was there. If there was a dwelling there, there's no evidence to support it as such other than word of mouth. It was within that woodland area. It didn't have such a large access. It didn't have such clearance around it. So yeah, I'd just like to make members aware, if they do deem it as brownfield, there is that policy to compare it to as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hall first, please. Thank you.
I remember going to this place in 2016 when it first came to committee. Stood with Councillor Kane at that time, looking down on this piece of land, and we couldn't see out wrong with the plan at that time. If you look at those pictures, if you look to the bottom right-hand corner of each picture, that's where the dwelling was. Now, we couldn't work out whether it was a coal weighing house or whether it was an actual house itself. Obviously, there were no ramp, although I'm not sure. There might have been a ramp down to it, actually, at that point in time. Yeah, there was, because we went down for a proper look. There were a lot of stone down there. You could tell that it had been, obviously, a house of some description. I find it confusing that one minute it's brownfield and next minute it's greenfield. I just find that weird. I see the people that are living there at the moment, you can see that they're wanting to tint at land, they're wanting to tidy it up. It's, if it were built on, it's not a loss, let's face it. It's a bit rough as it is, but it's a damn sight better than what it was. Personally, I don't see out wrong with what the people are wanting to do. So I would certainly back up Councillor Scott and Councillor Firth, and I would second Councillor Firth in allowing this development to proceed.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I've got Councillor Ramsey, please.
Can I just go back to the safety issue? I just want to explore it a little bit more. So what we're saying now is that by the wider sweep of the ramp, that potentially is closer to the coal mining entrance, and therefore there's a risk. What are we actually saying? I want to understand the risk and the safety of people if it was to be made into a residential property on a permanent basis. I just want to see whether or not we would be making the right decision that way.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. We want to respond, please.
Yeah, through you, Chair. The risk is ultimately unknown because we haven't got that no-build exclusion zone shown on a map. That's ultimately acts as a safety parameter around the historic coal mining legacy. So calculations would show, based on the stability, how close you could build to it. We don't have it, so we don't know. Now, when I spoke to the Coal Authority, they couldn't estimate because it is based on calculations. However, said there is a strong chance that development within 5 metres of the mine shaft would be within that no-build zone, which would then have the knock-on consequences of it being potentially making the land extremely unstable. So the risk is unknown, basically. The policy says that it has to be proven to us that it is safe and should ensure end-user safety, and that hasn't been shown.
Through you, Chair, then, is it all right just to ask a supplementary through you? So is the risk that the ramp will fall down, or is the risk to the residential property? Because I'm thinking that it's to the ramp and it's an access issue rather than to the property. Am I correct from what you're saying?
Through you, Chair, potentially, yes. The thing is, we don't know what the knock-on effect will be if that ramp did come down there. There is potentially knock-on implications. If it was to be supported, then they would have to get an AIP in place, which would then secure the stability of the highway next to it, so taking it outside the red line boundary. The immediate risk would be to the ramp and to the dwelling because they are the two closest things. However, without having that plan in front of us, and the one shown on screen there is what we have, you'd expect to see a circle or a kind of bubble around that mine shaft, which would set out the no-build zone. The square is the cap, it's not the no-build zone. We ultimately don't know what will fall within it. So, as I say, I wouldn't want to sit and tell you that something definitely wouldn't happen to the highway because it is an unknown risk. And that's why the Coal Authority currently have issues with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I
You
just...
one more, Councillor Ramsey?
Yeah, I'm really sorry, just so I understand it. So from a highways point of view that have reviewed this ramp, did you take that information into consideration?
Through you, Chair. We don't look at that information. The information that we look at is that ramp is needed to be that size to accommodate a vehicle as demonstrated on the swept path. So there is a conflict in theory. But we don't take into consideration any coal minings. It's just pure from a highways perspective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just ask a daft question? How would buildings insurance work for something like this? Is that something insurance companies look into?
Yeah, that it's not related in terms to the planning application itself. It's separate. I think what the point is that the information needs to be submitted to demonstrate that it is safe. That's where the onus is for the developer to confirm that it's safe. At the minute, the Coal Authority is the stance that they've not got that sufficient information to say that, yes, it is safe. Like I said, Callum has been in contact with the Coal Authority, and this is what they've confirmed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Firth, please.
Yes, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one, Chair, but that's why we have planning committees, is it not? And with local knowledge, I think it's acceptable. I've already proposed it, Council will second it, but could I add a rider that, as well as moving it, Callum, as our planning officer, has said he hasn't got the required information. Can we not approve it subject to receiving that information, and that information is satisfactory to the planning officer?
Do you want to come back then? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, that's right. Like I say, you can delegate certain things back to officers. So, yeah, like I say, if you felt that, for example, because what it's coming down to is the principle, I think what we all sort of agree here. So if members felt that the principle was acceptable, which we would need to hear your very special circumstances and discuss that further, you could then delegate the other two reasons in terms of for us to seek further information regarding the reasons 2 and 3 are set out in the update. So that is an option open to you. If those elements weren't acceptable, then we could refer back to committee and do it that way. So that's...
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor John Lawson, please?
Thank you, Chair. Right, the principle is arguable. We have local knowledge that, I put great store in, that if people have, perhaps not in living memory, but certainly in local knowledge memory, that if somewhere has been a dwelling, then that's kind of, that's there as a piece of evidence. But I also take on board that if that was particularly to do with mining and extraction, then that doesn't actually qualify as brownfield. And believe me, I know about brownfield in Greenbelt. With take the North Byerley development, that was entirely built on that. So there is a grey area, if you like, there, and I accept that, and I accept that there is an argument that might say that there is a principle that we can work on that. What I can't get past, though, is that in our planning update on the item 3 for refusal is the coal mining. I can't get past that. If the coal mining board don't have the information to make a recommendation on whether this is safe or not, that really worries me. That really, really worries me. I cannot put my name to overturning officers' recommendation to that because we are dealing with people's well-being and safety, and I can't put my name to that. So until that can be proved, I will go with officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor Gregg, please.
Thank you, Chair. And again, it's been good to go to the site visit here, see what's on the site in 2023. It does seem like previous owners of the site have acted unlawfully with regards to clearing it with the trees and siting the caravan on there. So we are where we are with the site being in the present state that it's in. I think what probably should have happened, for whatever reason didn't, when the site was cleared by trees, of the trees, if there was enough local concern within the community from local councillors, residents, it could have probably been referred to Forestry Commission for looking at tree restocking orders. I know there were no trees that you've confirmed, officers have confirmed, had TPOs on them. However, there are measures that can be placed on there if sites have been cleared unlawfully. Because there's no residents opposing it, and the two councillors have put ward councillors have put quite measured reasoning for this redevelopment, it does make this more difficult from my point of view on whether to support or to oppose it, just because of that local knowledge that Councillor Lawson referred to. The question I have got, through the Chair if possible, is for clarity on this reclaimed by or recovered by nature, because are the officers saying that in the eventuality that it was in the past brownfield, if we're being generous and it was brownfield in the past in the late 70s, when would it have been reclaimed by nature? Because how does that work? That's my question in terms of this reclaimed by nature, because obviously we have to have progress, don't we? We have to have some sort of change over time. So my concern is just with regards to that, how does that work? Is there a definition of it? And can this be clarified? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Do you want to come back in, please?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, that is essentially what we're saying, that if it was deemed that there were buildings on the site that were not related to mines or, was anything, and it was a brownfield site, then there is still this part in the definition that excludes land that was previously developed, that was brownfield, have blended into the landscape. Now, there isn't as such a definition, and I don't have any case law to hand, but from our usual practice, it's a judgment call ultimately. To undertake that assessment, we've looked at the same images that are in front of you today, and reviewing those to our professional opinions, that has been reclaimed by nature. It's ultimately indistinguishable from anything around it. There may have been remnants of buildings, but those buildings didn't exist in full. They were probably just footings as we've seen today, potentially a little bit more, but they weren't remaining in use, they weren't remaining fully built. And you can see nature had ultimately sprawled all the way through the site. So that is how we make that opinion. And then, as I stated previously, from 10.9, there is that assessment that if members did deem it was brownfield, then it's whether the impact of this proposal is more significant on the green belt than what was there before. So that's that assessment if you wanted to put it against that policy and deem it was brownfield. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate the information, because from the photographs that I've seen in 1960, there doesn't look to be really any, if little, trees. There doesn't look to be too many, but by 2002, obviously there were trees and there'd been a lot of growth on that from what I can see. It's just with regards to where we're at now, moving forward, in terms of we've got a new owner of the site, and we're dealing with the here and now. And it is something that I would like to see something happen with regards to an acceptable way forward from where we are, because at the moment it is an eyesore. I absolutely hate what's happened with regards to people doing unauthorised works, and I'm very conscious that I don't want to be sending a green light to people to go and undertake unlawful works with a view to circumventing planning law. So it's a difficult one, but it is an eyesore, and I recognise 2 of the ward councillors support this application. Maybe 3, I don't know yet. Will be interesting.
Thank you. Would you like to come back in again, please?
Yes, through you, Chair. And yeah, we agree that there should be some way forward on the site. Now, that doesn't have to necessarily be through granting development that's inappropriate in the Greenbelt. There is the enforcement notice served on the site, which would ultimately see the site cleared as it is now and restored to some effect. It wouldn't have the mature trees, obviously, because it'd be straight restoration, but it could be restored to as it was virtually. So that is a very valid way forward. The enforcement notice was served. It's still live. It wasn't complied with. There was questions sent under caution to the applicant. No response to those. So ultimately, that enforcement notice could be served at any time to restore the land as it was previously. So that is a solution as well to essentially eradicate the eyesore. In your words, with that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Pinnock, please.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I agree that we need some way of moving forward, it seems to me that the only way to deal with the current situation, is to refuse this application and suggest that the application put in something that is more acceptable. It seems to me impossible to do anything with the current application, given the reasons for refusal, which are all important, and given that the development proposed on the site would actually not comply with some of our local plan policies. And I see no reason why we should deliberately go against our local plan policies. Otherwise, why have we got them? I know it's difficult when you've got somebody's place where they live, but we have got a situation where the development that is there. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. The situation on the site at the moment is unauthorised. I think more or less everything that's on the site is unauthorised, including the ramp. So something needs to be done about it. But I'm sorry, but the only thing to do is to refuse it and ask the residents to start again with a new application. You can't amend the application as it exists. It would be too difficult, or the amendments that would be required would be too extensive. So I move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Lukic, please.
Thank you, Chair. I said at the start of this, I was very concerned about the principle of development, and there's been appeals to kind of accept the principle of development and appeals on both sides. I feel a lot more persuaded actually by the officer recommendation and the reasons in there. It's actually very, very rare to get a proposal to committee for a new dwelling in the green belt. And what we're essentially being asked to do is to change the land as it was before the works that have taken place, to change that into a site for a dwelling. This is in the green belt. And just to kind of go back to the basic principles of the green belt and what the NPPF says, the NPPF clearly directs us that we should regard the construction of new buildings as inappropriate in the green belt with some exceptions. It's been argued that it may be brownfield land and that could be an exception, but its officer's position is that it's not brownfield land. If it was brownfield land, it would have been reclaimed by nature anyway, so it's no longer considered as such. even though it was used in relation to mining operations in the first place, so it wasn't brownfield land. So it's to be regarded as inappropriate development in the green belt. That means under the NPPF it should not be approved except in very special circumstances. And very special circumstances do not exist unless the potential harm to the green belt is clearly outweighed by other considerations. And I really don't think that all the other considerations in this outweigh the inappropriate development, along with the other reasons that have been mentioned. And I really do sympathise greatly with the position that the applicant is in with the site, but it really flies in the face of the principles behind the green belt and what should and should not be approved in the green belt. So for that reason, I'm going to second the officer recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Luckett. Councillor Ramsey, please.
Just a quick question, please. I heard Councillor Firth suggest, my primary concern is safety of the residents. And I've been persuaded by the local councillors that actually there is some knowledge around this site that we should take note of. So Councillor Firth suggested that there be some caveat around your motion to approve. Can I just understand how that would look, and then we can just make sure that we are taking the before we get to a vote, that we're taking the concerns about resident safety seriously.
Councillor Ramsey, you've stolen my thunder again, because Councillor Firth did ask for a condition to be put on for approval, and I'm sure officers can word it better than I could word it. So can you just word it for us, then we know what the condition will be?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it would be a bit similar to when you've got an application where you would say sort of conditional full approval subject to the delegation of authority to officers to 1, negotiate and secure acceptable details relating to the Kirklees Wildlife Habitat Network, 2, to secure additional details which show mitigation relating to like your highway, your coal mining risk assessment, and then 3, to impose all necessary and appropriate conditions, and then 4, to issue your decision notice. So it will be along those sort of lines, and similar to what you sometimes see a report in the agenda, so it would be along those sort of lines. What we would also then include at the end of that, if, for example, officers can't agree acceptable details relating to the Wildlife Habitat Network and the coal mining risk assessment, we could refer it back to Planning Committee, and we do normally include like a time frame on that. So, for example, within 3 months, for example, we would then bring it back if we can't reach that resolution.
Thank you. Can I ask, I think niggle's a new term for planning this afternoon, if the coal mining risk assessment then, if we went for approval and we had that condition on, and the coal mining risk assessment came back and said, no, it is dangerous to build on here, what would happen next?
It would be dependent how the delegated authority was given to officers today. So if you gave us authority to then move forward to refuse the application, we can write that into the final recommendation. Or if it is that members wanted to see it referred back to Planning Committee, if we were not able to seek that acceptable detail, we could bring it back to Planning Committee. So it depends how members would want to see that. If officers can't resolve the details, to bring it back or to issue the refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Pinnock, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to propose that if we are minded to approve this application, that it come back to committee anyway, regardless, considering all the things that we've been asked to append to it. I think that given the change, if you like, from what the officer's recommendation is, that I think committee needs to see what the proposals are before it's finally signed off.
Sorry, Councillor Pinnock, you're not wanting deferral? You no.
If we are minded to approve it, with all the attachments, if you like, and it was suggested that if some of them didn't work, that it would come back to committee. I would propose that once all those have been finalised, that it is brought back to committee for approval, rather than delegate it to officers to sort those things out, but it's got to come back to committee for final approval.
Officers, can that happen?
That's in effect a deferral to resolve those issues. Yeah.
Thank you. I just needed to clarify that. Yeah, so thank you for that. So, Councillor Pinnock.
Can I wait until we voted on it before I say that again, as it were?
Right, because you did actually move refusal earlier on. Yeah.
So can we be clear what we're actually voting for? The principle of development subject to approval, the conditions by officers that satisfy officers, and it's then only then, if officers are not satisfied, will it come back.
Yes, officers.
That's correct. So yeah, but can I just be very clear what the grounds in terms of the principle? Like I say, we just need to be very clear, because this is a green belt site. So yeah, if we can just make sure we fully address that reason. So if we can sort of confirm in terms of what I suppose what we think the site is, whether we think it is a brownfield or a greenfield site within the green belt, but no matter which way, we need those very special circumstances. So that's what I'm asking you for. What do you think those very special circumstances are in this case to be allowing development in the green belt, which would otherwise be inappropriate?
Okay. Councillor Firth,
well, to make it clear, my original referral was a brownfield site, and as Councillor Scott also mentioned, a windfall site, and it's both.
Are officers happy to do appropriate wording?
Thank you, Chair, for bringing me back in. So what policy sets out is, like I say, whether it's if you consider it a brownfield site, it needs to you need to take into account whether it has a materially greater impact on the openness and the character of the green belt. In this case, it would, because you can see there's the ramp that forms part of the application. There's then the house which forms part of the application. Sorry, I didn't hear that. So in terms of those very special circumstances, we need to be clear as to why we are accepting the scheme. Like I said, brownfield isn't a very special circumstance. It needs to be something relating to whether it's the site, whether it's the justification that's being put forward by the applicant, anything that you've heard as part of the debate. So those are those very special circumstances there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Gregg and Councillor Lawson wanting to speak. Councillor Gregg, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wasn't sure whether or not we'd actually got some ambiguity as to whether or not it's still what. I know that officers believe that it is Greenbelt, and they're leaning towards that. But because of the fact that there was this suggestion that it may have been Brownbelt, but let's just say that if it was Brownbelt, the officers, I understand, are saying that it's been reclaimed by nature. If it has been reclaimed by nature, and if we're being erring on generosity, it is probably quite a short period of time, from the late 70s till maybe the year 2000s. So with that in mind, would that be, given the fact that it was a relatively short window, would that be a reason for us to lean towards assuming brownfield?
Through you,
Thank
Chair.
you.
Yeah, it's still in the green belt no matter what. So even if it's brownfield land, local plan policy LP 59 covers off when schemes are acceptable in the green belt when they are to redevelop brownfield land. Now within that there is sets of policies, and I think it was 10.9. It's the one that I mentioned previously, and an application, even if it's on brownfield land within the green belt, still has to meet that policy. And that policy is whether the scheme that's come forward has a greater impact on what was there previously or not. So even if members were looking at saying the Bell Cabin building that stood there before and it wasn't reclaimed by nature and it was brownfield throughout, our point is, and as I mentioned from 10.9 through to 10.11 or 12, was that the impact is still significantly greater than what was there. So just because it's brownfield, it doesn't automatically give it that approval and make it appropriate in the green belt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. One more. Councillor Gregg?
No, thank you. Just wanted to say thank you for that clarification, because obviously it does clarify it very much so on that front. It does seem like there isn't, unless there's a really great reason, it can't be deviated from what's being said, and I appreciate that's going to leave us in a maybe not a great situation.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity and through you, could I ask officers, when we talk about special circumstances, are we talking about the classic greenbelt circumstances like educational use, sport and leisure, agricultural building? Are those the special circumstances we're talking about?
In terms of what some of the uses you've just referred to in terms of, like, say, your sport and leisure, that's something that's classed as an appropriate use in the green belt. So you've got appropriate uses and then you've got inappropriate uses. So in this case, it's an inappropriate use, and a new dwelling in the green belt is inappropriate, provided you've got them very special circumstances. So sometimes, just trying to think of what we've had in, if you've got a farm workers dwelling, so something like that, that could be sort of that very special, well, that would be appropriate as well, but that's like a circumstances to when it could be acceptable. You would have things like, if, for example, there was some sort of other enhancement through, I don't know, like through your biodiversity, if we weren't at the starting point here, where it's got unauthorised works. So if you had a site which it was as it was, and then you were sort of building something but then enhancing the biodiversity on the site, so sometimes you might have sort of additional planting or something like that, that could help towards a very special circumstance.
Or particularly eco-friendly builds and things like that. Those are the special circumstances.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So, Chair, with that clarity, I'm still to hear a special circumstance.
Thank you. Councillor Lukic again, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, can I query through you, it's been suggested that windfall could be considered as a very special circumstance, but that could apply to any site in the green belt. So could I seek the guidance of officers on whether windfall can be properly considered as very special circumstances? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In this case, no, your windfalls would normally be where it's unallocated or on your sort of a brownfield site, or sometimes you can have your green belt, but that would be, like, so for example, if it was like an affordable house on the site. So these are all different reasons as to why it could be acceptable. But in terms of a windfall site, I would, as officers, I would not be recommending in this case for the one house which would be not providing an affordable house, for example, to the open market, would be a very special circumstance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more from members? Right, so I have Councillor Firth who has moved approval and Councillor Hall who has seconded approval with the conditions. Does anybody want clarification on what the conditions were? I do. Could officers just repeat again so we really know what the conditions are. Thank you. Sorry, officers.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So that would ultimately revert details back to officers to secure the additional coal mining information, particularly that no-build zone. Agree details with regard to the ecology of the site and provide that net gain as per policy, which could be very challenging, obviously, given it's cleared out the wildlife habitat network. Just so members are aware, there was other recommended conditions from consultees throughout. These will be technical details of the ramp and securing AIP, details of the ramp in terms of drainage and surfacing, additional coal information investigation that we've spoken about, the full suite of contaminated land, so that will be further investigations for any land contamination rather than to do with the coal stability. Completing the ramp in the timely scale, landscaping plans, details of material, details of drainage, and we could potentially look to remove any PD rights as well. But yeah, in terms of what you're referring to, those back, it will be to agree details of the ecological design, to provide the net gain, and to secure additional information from coal.
Thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, clearly we're in danger of tying ourselves in knots here, but if we are minded to approve, then I would like to insist that all the text that Mr. Harrison has given us is appended to the decision notice. Sorry, that it's appended to the record of the meeting, so that we know what it is that has to be brought back to the committee. Sorry, that officers are going to try and determine, but bring back to committee if some of them don't work. I don't think it's unreasonable, because given the previous officer recommendation was to refuse, no conditions obviously were listed in the report. So I think we need to know what conditions, well, not conditions, what information is being asked for and determined as part of the application. So I think that needs to happen. But we haven't voted on it yet. So I'm just putting that forward if the eventuality happens.
There was quite a lot there. Would you like to come in, Sandra, please?
Well, I wanted to come in as well. We still need the reasons for, if it is a recommendation, they're not clear enough yet on the very special circumstances of Greenbelt and the other things. We need more clarification. Yeah? Anything you want to add?
That's right. We still need to be clear on what those very special circumstances are to be allowing the development. So it's something what we could look at doing is sort of covering a little bit, I think, what Councillor Pinnock has just suggested. We could bring a report back to members if you wanted to see that, which would set out what the sort of what the full recommendation would be, but in effect that's a further deferral and delaying. So I think, like I say, we just need to, if we can be clear on what those very special circumstances are, then as members, you've got that, the vote, and it's being seconded. But we just need to know what those very special circumstances are, then we can move forward to the decision, to making the vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So members who wanting approval, can you come up with any specific wording that would help this, or is anybody wanting to move now to a deferral? There's a lot of information there. Councillor Gregg, please.
Yeah, I think I might be wrong, but I think there is probably going to be a challenge to find these circumstances, exceptional circumstances, because with the application as it is, I think Councillor Pinnock mentioned eco homes, biodiversity, these kind of things. If it was deferred, maybe there was an opportunity to change to something like that. I don't know whether that's a possibility. If it is, I would be supportive of deferral. However, again, I'll pass it over to, obviously, other councillors who might be able to give us a reason for approval.
Councillor Firth?
Yes, before discuss that again. Can I remind you of that I moved that we accept the principle of development because we touched on the safety of the site and that was concerned to members, and that can be satisfied with planning officers. All of a sudden, we finished up with almost an essay of things that is going to be added to that. Can we do it simply, please? That I moved it with, in principle of development, that the officer looks at the safety of the site and works with the applicant to make that possible.
And brings it back if that's not achieved.
Yes, and bring it back if that's not achieved.
Can we take guidance on this?
Yeah.
Thank you.
What officers are trying to do is to ensure that a sound decision is made on the application. Obviously, there is a risk of judicial review if a sound decision isn't made. So that is why we are asking for those very special circumstances to address what is set out in the national policy. So like I said, it's to try and ensure that a sound decision is made by members today. So that is why we are providing that advice. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask if it's national policy or our policy?
Just to confirm, Chair, it's national.
Thank you. Councillor Lukic.
Thank you, Chair. To approve this in the green belt requires the very special circumstances. So the motion needs to have the circumstances attached to it, I believe. So if there are no very special circumstances attached to this motion, I think it should be withdrawn or ruled out of order. Because we can't, as far as I'm aware, we cannot make that decision. It would be contravene the NPPF unless we have discretion to run against the NPPF. So I just want to query that, please.
Thank you. Can I just turn to Office for guidance here, because we've had a mover and a seconder for approval with conditions. We've had a mover and a seconder for refusal. It's been hinted at deferral, and now it's been hinted for withdrawal. I really would, as chair, appreciate some guidance to make sure that we get this right. Thank you.
Yeah. If, for recommendation, what we're saying is councillors can come to that decision, but they have to back it up by the very special circumstances to allow this development in Greenbelt. And as at the moment, nothing's come forward, so we could be challenged on that.
So, we need some wording then to support the approval. And it seems that we're struggling to get that. I'm going to have to turn to someone.
Through you, Chair, I think this is where it's coming down to the recommendation that's in front of you in terms of what can be addressed there. Just thinking in terms of very special circumstances, as I sort of suggested earlier on, it's things where, for example, you might have a biodiversity improvement on the site or some enhancement to the site that way. Whether members think that there could be some sort of, as part of the landscaping, could provide a very special circumstance linked in. I think it's a very tenuous one, but that is something, and it's up to members to put forward to us what you feel those very special circumstances are, but that is something that you could perhaps consider in terms of part of like a wider landscaping scheme and enhancement as part of that, as part of a very special circumstance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I need special circumstances.
Well, on that, it's been a brownfield site for a very long time, regardless of, I know the site. But I'm sure, I am asked, well, why would I? Because we haven't discussed it with anyone. I'm sure the applicant, or his agent, or her agent, I think that's the lady, would be more than willing to, where possible, because it's only a small site when you look at it, to green what's left of the site. And I think, I'm asking you now, Julia, would that be acceptable to put, we would bring the biodiversity back onto the site by planting trees where it could be done, or planting shrubbery where it could be done. That in turn will bring some wildlife back to the site. Would that be special enough?
Thank you, Chair. So I've taken note in terms of the very special circumstance there, which Councillor Firth has just put forward. So in terms of members, you've got a very special circumstance which has been put forward by Councillor Firth. It's up to you to consider whether that is adequate when you move to your vote. That's what you'll be voting on, along with then the delegation of the authority for officers to resolve the two matters relating to the the reasons for refusal 2 and 3 in the update for those to be resolved via officers, and then to impose all necessary and appropriate conditions, and then to issue the decision. So that's what the vote in effect is moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is everybody comfortable with that? No. Shall we move to the vote with what's been said?
Just one moment.
Found some, I'll just run it by you. For special circumstance, an overall shortfall in housing supply for a particular area.
What area is that?
Long Lane.
Long Lane, I suppose it is.
Is that any significance to
We've got a reason. I think we've got a perfectly adequate reason going forward. Can we move on?
Local need for residential accommodation or particular types of tenures, i.e. bungalow.
Yeah, I think with that you're opening the floodgates to development in the green belt, so you just need to be a bit considerate of that. So I think in terms of the site-specific one, I think if we go in terms of that very special circumstance that Councillor Firth had suggested, I think consider that when you're making your vote, casting your vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, officers. With that condition that Councillor Firth has added, Councillor Firth has moved approval, Councillor Hall has second approval. So can we go around and vote for approval? Thank you.
Councillor Firth.
4.
Councillor Hall.
4.
Councillor Judd.
4.
Councillor Pervez.
4.
Councillor Ramsey.
4 if we review the safety. Yeah.
Councillor Gregg.
Against.
Councillor Lukic.
Against.
Councillor Lawson.
Against.
Councillor Pinnock.
Against.
Councillor Lowe.
Abstain.
So that's 5, 4 and 1 abstention. So it is delegated to officers.
Thank you, members. Can I thank officers for that as well? That was two quite intense planning applications that we've just gone through. Can I suggest we just have a 5-minute comfort break, please? 5 minutes, because we've still got 2 more to discuss. Thank you. Thank you, members. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 11, and that is planning application 2022-91911, erection of a residential development consisting of 48 dwellings with associated highways and landscaping land at Cliff Hill, Denbydale, Huddersfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Richard Gilbert, Senior Planner in the Majors and Minerals Planning Team. Item 11 on the agenda is application 2022-91911 for the erection of a residential development with associated highways and landscaping on an allocated housing site. The application site lies in the north of Denbydale, to the west of existing houses located on Leek Hall Crescent, to the northwest of residential properties on Springhead Gardens, to the northeast of a Grade 2 listed Methodist church, and east of surrounding houses accessed from Cumberworth Lane. The site comprises a parcel of grassland which measures approximately 1.9 hectares in size, with its topography falling in gradient steeply from north to south. The site is bound by a public right-of-way across its northern boundary, beyond which there is further grassland and trees, which serve as a buffer to open agricultural land situated further north. The proposal is a full application for a residential use comprising development of 48 dwelling houses. The proposal would be accessed from the west via Cumberworth Lane and would require alterations to the site frontage, including the installation of footways to land outside of the red line boundary and held in third-party ownership. The dwelling houses are set at a scale of between 2 and 3 stories owing to the site's topography, and the housing mix would include 8 number 2 bedroom, 9 number 3 bedroom, 22 number 4 bedroom and 9 number 5 bedroom units. A submitted site remediation strategy alludes to the extraction of approximately 12,000 tonnes of coal through a systematic open cast mining operation that would be conducted alongside the removal of historic clay pit and former coal mining working voids that geologically litter the site. The proposed winning and working of minerals was not disclosed in the application form, nor included in the development description for the application. However, the extraction of coal from the site is treated as a part of the proposed development alongside the residential element, given its citation in the supporting document. It should be added that development management officers, alongside the head of planning and the environmental health group leader, have sought submission of an alternative remediation strategy that would consider the feasibility of less intensive intervention. Failing this, officers requested the application be withdrawn in favour of splitting the minerals development from the residential part of the proposal. However, the applicant indicated a preference for the authority to decide the application as things stand. The presentation will now turn to providing a brief overview of the reasons for refusal in turn. Reason for refusal 1 specifies the lack of information necessary to allow the local planning authority to make a decision on the application in respect of the risks concerning contaminated land. This is to the extent that officers are not sufficiently reassured that the site is fully understood from a contaminated land perspective, nor that residual impacts resulting from the site's remediation could be handled effectively and safely through planning conditions because those risks are not fully understood. For instance, the excavations numbered on the plan on the slide would likely incur alterations to ground gas pathways that would render the current ground gas monitoring submissions invalid. Similarly, the proposed temporary coal washing area is adjacent to a watercourse that runs along the northeastern edge of the site. There is therefore potential for this situation to give rise to acid drainage, which demonstrates the lack of consideration given to the environmental impacts of the site's remediation. As concerns reason for refusal 2, the same concerns are applied to the winning and working of coal as mineral development in of itself, not just as the remediation of a site pursuant to its residential development. The MPPF is clear in respect of coal extraction that planning permission should not be granted unless the development can be made environmentally acceptable or can be made so by planning conditions, and if this is not the case, that there are overriding national, local or community benefits which outweigh its likely impact when taking all matters into account, including any resultant environmental impacts. The identified contaminated land issues, alongside the applicant's lack of consideration for wider human health impacts, particularly those related to noise and air quality for surrounding residents, highlight that the development is not environmentally feasible based on current information or the absence thereof, and thus the development cannot be made acceptable by planning conditions. Given the unknown severity of the potential harm incurred, the benefits of the residential development to the local community do not override these significant environmental concerns. No wider local or national benefits are discerned either. Moving on to the remaining reasons for refusal. With regard to reason for refusal 3, the proposed 48 dwelling houses over a net site area of 1.7 hectares equates to 28.2 dwellings per hectare and therefore falls short of the local plan's 35 dwellings per hectare target, which informs the site's allocation yield displayed on the screen. As is evidenced on this slide, reason for refusal number 4 concerns proposed plots 35 and 36 relative to existing properties at numbers 2 and 3 Springhead Gardens, whereby the rear windows and garden terraces of those proposed dwellings would significantly overlook and reduce the privacy of the existing residential properties at significant detriment to their amenity. The identified impacts on privacy are contrary to the supplementary planning document House Builders Design Guide. Moving on to reason for refusal number 5, this particular reason is justified on the lack of information provided to determine if the internal estate road could be adequately developed as proposed without incurring highway safety or operational issues. It is noted that other elements of the proposal, such as the vehicular access from Cumberworth Lane, also require further information. However, in the particular instance of the internal estate road, a reason for refusal is sustained on the premise of the significant scope of outstanding information that would be required to inform its layout. Indeed, given the sloping nature of the site and the resultant impact gradients can have on footway requirements for estate roads as set out within the Highways Design Guide SPD, significant layout alterations could be required. Reason for refusal 6 is in a similar vein to reason 5, albeit that it relates to a lack of information concerning the potential for significant privacy loss of an existing residential dwelling called Crook Cottage. Finally, the 7th reason for refusal is included in the recommended decision as the terms of planning policy requirements relating to affordable housing provision, biodiversity net gain, education, sustainable travel and site management have not been agreed as required by various policies within the local plan. For the reasons aforementioned, the application is put to members with an officer recommendation to refuse permission for the proposed development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I've just got one speaker who's joining us on Teams this afternoon. I've got a Nick Gold. Is Nick with us?
I did, yeah. Thank you.
Hi, Nick. Thank you very much. Nick, you've got 3 minutes to speak, and I will give you a 30-second warning at the end. Okay? You may start. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
The scheme has evolved since the first proposal and responded to several contributing factors, including the public consultation, identified local housing needs, and the constraints of the land itself. The proposal for consideration in front of the committee today represents an attractive new development with a selection of 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom homes, each designed to reflect the character of Denby Dale's quaint stone terrace cottages and architectural style of rural Yorkshire villages. The design responds to the constraints and opportunities of the site and to the local context. The looping road wraps around the steep topography of Cliff Hill, with dwellings placed to maximise the potential of the site, boasting beautiful views of the valley and open landscapes, as well as meeting the needs of modern buyers. An experienced range of consultants have been employed throughout the application process, and the proposal presented takes into consideration the civil needs of the development, including the ground conditions, retaining walls, roads and drainage. Additionally, the application is supported with ecology, transport, air and sound quality reports. Urban have been in regular contact with the planning department throughout the application process and responded to queries raised by both consultees and the planning department in a quick and considerate fashion, with amendments made where necessary to deliver an improved scheme that meets the planning requirements. Urban have responded to a variety of queries, included to, but not limited to, the levels, the road alignment, drainage, cross-sections with existing residences, waste collection points, tree preservation orders, culvert locations and site entrance. In addition to this, Urban have been approachable and accommodating to additional requests such as visits, site visits, and enhanced dialogue with the LLFA. Through the planning process, Urban have been receptive to the Council's request for extensions of times to allow planning departments and consultees additional time to respond to not only additional inquiries, but the initial information submitted by Urban. Urban are fully aware of the local resistance over the proposed land stabilisation strategy, which has been derived from extensive ground investigations completed by Rogers. These included a series of trial pits, boreholes, review of historic records and laboratory sampling. The stabilisation strategy aims to provide a suitable solution that considers both the impact on the village and its current inhabitants
30
and the benefits
seconds,
of living in a
please.
preferred high-quality stabilised product. The prior extraction method is a preferred and recognised method by the Coal Authority and referenced in its prior extraction of coal resources fact sheet, which obviously says it should be given due consideration and has been appropriate in both urban and major urban situations. It's worth noting the Coal Authority were satisfied with necessary conditions attached. Having received the recent comments from the Environmental Agency and now obviously the ones addition to the report, Urban does disagree that suitable planning conditions could have been applied to a planning approval and that full detailed reports and method of workings could have been submitted prior
Sorry,
to the
Nick, I
commencement
need
on
to
site.
stop you there. Your time's up.
That's
Sorry.
fine.
Okay, but thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, I will open up to members. I've got Councillor Hall, please.
Short and sweet. I'll move officers' recommendation to refuse this. And think one thing that does need highlighting is it falls way short of the amount of houses we need per hectare. If every application went through that were like this, we'd never achieve anything at all. So accept officers' recommendation, refuse it. I'm moving.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Pinnock, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second that. But in doing so, I do have a worry that we've got an application here on an allocated site, which seems to fall short of practically everything. And I do worry I do worry that we can get an application that will actually work. It seems to me that this one doesn't. But I would question whether we can find an application that you know, a scheme that would work, probably including more houses, admittedly, but even considering the topography. But I second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Anyone else? Can I just add that I wasn't happy with this planning application either. So we have a mover and a seconder for refusal. Everybody happy to move to the vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do it by show of hands if there's no dissension.
Show of hands for refusal then? That application is refused. Thank you, members. Thank you, officer. Thank you, members. Agenda item number 12, planning application 2023/90203, erection of two-storey rear extension, Salt Pie Farm. I think that's lovely, sorry. Penniston Road, Bird's Edge at Huddersfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon again, members. Presenting application 2023-90203 at Salt Pie Farm, Penniston Road, Bird's Edge for the erection of two-storey rear extension. The application is brought to the Heavy Woollen Planning Subcommittee in accordance with the Council's scheme of delegation as set out in the Constitution, as the applicant is Councillor M. Watson. Salt Pie Farm is a stone-built property with access from Penniston Road via a sloped driveway. The property is located within the Greenbelt within a short ribbon of residential properties. Otherwise, the property is surrounded by open fields in a raised position from Penniston Road. The curtilage includes an outbuilding, which is currently attached via a small link extension. It's frozen. It's not doing anything, is it? Oh. The images on screen now show the building at present. The building is faced in stone. The roof includes a short pitch to the front elevation, a long cat-side pitch to the rear, appearing two-storey at the front and single to the rear. Other than the small conservatory to the south elevation, as shown in the top left, there are no other extensions to the property, and it is that original size. The applicant is seeking permission for a two-storey rear extension. The rear extension will project 3 metres from the original rear wall of the property and would extend across the width of the original dwelling at a height of 6.4 metres to the eaves. The proposed extension would have a perpendicular pitched roof design. The walls will be constructed using stone with stone slate roofing. The proposed floor plans on screen show the extension would host 2 bedrooms, a snug and a downstairs shower/WC room. The pictures on screen show the cat-side roof, which will be replaced by the proposed extensions. Local Plan Policy LP 57 and Chapter 13 of the MPPF allow for extensions in the Greenbelt, so long as the original building remains the dominant... That's not on mine, yeah.
I think you can carry on now.
The increase in the footprint of the dwelling over and above the existing house is limited to 3 metres. The bulk of the increases from the extensions will be over an existing cat slide to incorporate a first floor, which would clearly increase the massing of the property and have potential to result in disproportionate additions and impact on the openness and character of the Greenbelt. However, much of the extension has already been agreed via a certificate of lawful development. The current application includes a pitch roof as opposed to the agreed flat roof via the certificate of lawfulness. Therefore, the only material difference between this application and what can be built under the said certificate would be the pitched roof. In regard to visual amenity and design, officers consider that the proposed pitched roof would result in a more satisfactory appearance than the already agreed flat roof. As such, given the lawful fallback position agreed, together with a limited scale of the alteration to the roof form, the works proposed are not considered to result in any significant harm in terms of the Greenbelt and are considered acceptable with regard to visual amenity and design. There are no concerns with regard to any other matters, and as such, officers recommend the application be approved in accordance with the conditions set out in the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I have no public speakers on this. I'll open it up to members. Councillor Lukic, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think that it's quite right that these applications are brought to committee when they involve members of the council. I think the report's very clear that the vast majority of the proposal is a permitted development, and it would be with a flat roof rather than the pitched roof. And I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be permitted with it shouldn't be approved with a pitched roof, and there haven't been any representations. So I'd just like to simply move the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll second that, given the current fallback position and the nature of it. It's only here because it is a councillor, which, as Councillor Lukic quite rightly said, is absolutely correct that it should, and we should have every councillor's applications here. But yes, second that.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Any more comments, people? Okay, I have a proposer for approval and a seconder of approval. As there's no other comments, we just by show of hands, everybody in favour of approval of this planning application? That planning application is approved. Members, just before you leave, before I close the meeting, can I just say thank you to you all this afternoon. Thank you to those who were able to attend the site visits, but it's been a really, really interesting committee meeting. There's been some great debates, great discussions, great questions answered. And please can I thank planning officers as well for all your support today as well, and not forgetting the IT team in the corner. We'll remember them. Thank you. I'll now close the meeting. Thank you.